Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and we warmly welcome the family of Second Lieutenant John Clifford Peel, whose story will be told shortly by Group Captain David Miller from the Royal Australian Air Force, who is the grandson of Second Lieutenant John Clifford Peel's fiancée, Marion Amiot. We're honoured to acknowledge His Excellency Mr. Rikiro Takahashi, Ambassador of Japan, and the accompanying delegation representing the Japan-Australia Parliamentary Friendship Association. We warmly welcome, representing the Royal Flying Doctor Service, Mr. Tony Vaughan, CEO of Central Operations, Mr. Scott Chapman, CEO of RFDS Victoria, and Ms. Rebecca Tompkinson, CEO of Western Operations. We also warmly welcome the members of the Joint Boards of Management of the Uluru Kata-Duta National Park, Kakadu National Park, the Budari National Park, who are also attending this evening. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From Queensland, Pullen Vale State School and Nanango State High School. If able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of laurel tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Second Lieutenant John Clifford Peel. John Peel was born on the 17th of April, 1894 at Inverleigh, Victoria, the first of 9 children born to Charles and Susan Peel. Known as Cliff to his family and friends, he attended Inverleigh State School before studying at Geelong High School. He then went on to study medicine at the University of Melbourne. Prior to the war, Cliff spent 5 years in the Australian Military Forces, including a period in the Melbourne University Rifles. 2 other members of Cliff's family joined the war effort. His younger brother, Corporal George Laurie Peel, DCM, served with distinction in the 3rd Light Horse Field Ambulance in Gallipoli. Cliff's cousin, Colonel Thomas Peel Dunhill, was a surgeon with the 1st Australian Field Hospital in France. Taking an interest in aviation, in 1917, Cliff volunteered for the fledgling Australian Flying Corps at Point Cook in Victoria. While training in Australia, Cliff linked his interests in aviation to his medical studies. He wrote a letter to the Reverend John Flynn, a Presbyterian minister who worked in the rural and outback areas of Central Australia. In the letter, Cliff gave a practical description of how an aerial medical service could be established and outlined its cheap cost relative to the overland service provided by truck or train. In time, Reverend Flynn was to found the Aerial Medical Service, which became known as the Royal Flying Doctor Service. Cliff enlisted in the Australian Imperial Forces in October 1917, and shortly before he sailed to Egypt aboard the transport ship Nestor in November, he became engaged to his childhood friend, Marion Amiot. Soon after arriving in Egypt, he was on board the ship again, this time bound for England. Once there, he undertook further pilot training at the Royal Flying Corps School of Aeronautics in Reading. On the 2nd of September 1918, Cliff joined his unit in France, Number 3 Squadron of the Australian Flying Corps. When Cliff joined the Australian Flying Corps, aviation was in its infancy. During the war, all belligerent powers had realised the advantages that air superiority would bring and developed new aircraft and new tactics. By the time Cliff reached the front, aeroplanes were being used as fighters, bombers, spotters for artillery, and for photographic reconnaissance. On the day that Cliff reached the front, Australian troops had consolidated their capture of the French village of Mont-Saint-Quentin. After the capture of the nearby city of Péronne, over the coming days, their attention turned to the formidable German trench system known as the Hindenburg Line. Alongside a large number of British and Commonwealth forces, their objective was to capture the old British trenches and break into the German defences. The British offensive on the Hindenburg Line began on the 18th of September, and Number 3 Squadron provided support by bombing smoke bombs on German lines to impede visibility. Flying RE-8s, British-made 2-seater biplane bombers and reconnaissance aeroplanes, the men of Number 3 Squadron were able to photograph the movements of the troops on the ground. This important information was then provided to commanders. The next day, the 19th of September 1918, Cliff piloted an RE-8 with his observer, Lieutenant John Patrick Jeffers, on a similar photographic reconnaissance mission. They went up with an escort of other planes, but were separated from the others in the clouds. All the other aircraft returned safely, but Cliff's plane disappeared without trace. The two men were presumed killed in action, and neither their remains nor the wreckage of their plane was ever found. Cliff is commemorated at the Arras Flying Services Memorial in Arras, France, alongside nearly 1,000 Commonwealth airmen who died on the Western Front and have no known grave. The Lieutenant J. Clifford Peel airstrip, part of the Silver City Highway in western New South Wales, commemorates Cliff's early influence on the Royal Flying Doctor Service. Second Lieutenant John Clifford Peel is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Second Lieutenant John Clifford Peel, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, students, that concludes the last post ceremony, We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.